Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce Ervin Dimeny, who is the Commissioner for the Department of Workplace Standards, where he has the responsibility of enforcing Kentucky's occupational safety and health laws, wage and hour laws, child labor laws, and administering the state's registered apprenticeship programs. Before that, he worked for the Administrative Office of the Courts as part of their interpreting services. Graduate of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, and also has his Juris Doctorate from the University of Louisville. I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Dimeny for the first time last month in Henderson when he came to help a local company, Technoraplex, celebrate a safety achievement, and it was great to chat with you that day. An interesting note, I think Mr. Dimeny and his family are originally from the legendary region of Transylvania in Romania. And he may or may not know that Henderson County was founded by the Transylvania Company, and that it's completely unrelated, but we are legendary as well in Henderson County in our own minds. So when he comes to Northwest Kentucky, I like to think that Mr. Dimeny is coming home in many respects. So please join me in welcoming Commissioner Ervin Dimeny.
Secret is revealed why I feel so home here, right? Actually, first time I came to Paducah was in 1999 when I became a citizen. I was sworn in, not Owensboro, this region to Paducah, southwestern Kentucky, when I received my citizenship. And on the way back, we stopped in Owensboro, and we sort of got lost, and we found our way through Indiana. So that's my first experience going through this region. So thank you so much for having me. I'm not a big IT person here, but there we go. For the invitation. Over the past couple of years, I had the opportunity to really travel around the state, this part of the state, and get to know a lot of people, hear stories, find out about individual stories, companies, youngsters. It's fascinating. We have a beautiful state, and I think we have an incredible opportunity ahead of us. A little bit about what I do at the cabinet. Yes, OSHA is one of my divisions. That's not always the most welcome the conversation with a lot of companies. Education and training as part of the OSHA, we are focusing on safety, total worker health. It's one of our primary obligations as a cabinet to ensure that our employees, our workers are safe, provide a safe and healthy environment for everyone. Our wage and hour division and the apprenticeship. You probably heard, how many of you have heard about apprenticeship? Right, quite a few. So we spent a lot of time over the last year and a half, 2 years talking apprenticeship, about the notion of what apprenticeship is. What does that mean to individuals, to companies, to a region, to youngsters, to those who are second chance seekers, those who are underemployed, unemployed, just everyone that's potentially in the job market. If I were to put this sort of in context, this discussion, I need to start out with a statement that the governor made as part of his vision for Kentucky, to really put Kentucky on a trajectory to become the engineering and manufacturing hub of the United States. You remember that? Have you ever heard that statement? Yeah. So, and if you look back over the past 2 years, there have been a lot of intentional decisions in terms of workforce development funding, skills scholarships, decisions that defined a pathway towards an intentional, defining intentionality related to workforce development, right? Not only in Kentucky, but across the country, across the globe, really, workforce development is becoming a crisis, if you wish. Yes, I was born in Transylvania, and I learned about Dracula, all those things after I moved to the United States. But believe it or not, even in Transylvania, across Europe, around the United States, finding skilled workers is an issue. And, and there are a lot of smart people who wrote about this, who addressed this for decades. And here we're in Kentucky and Owensboro, and I think this is an issue here too, across the Commonwealth. We have right now between 200,000 and 300,000 openings in Kentucky, job openings, and companies are struggling to find skilled workers. We are remodeling our basement. I can't find drywall installation people. Finding a carpenter, a plumber, is at a premium. Well, let me tell you a bit about my story. After we go through a lot of times through the conversation about where my accent comes from, and we decide it's not Hazard, Kentucky. You know, the conversation revolves around how did you wind up here, right? One of the very proud and interesting part of my life was working for Mercedes-Benz in Louisville, Kentucky for about 9 years. I came to Louisville in '95 with nothing, with a couple of suitcases, but a lot of skills. My father, even in communism, he had a little shop, and he apprenticed us. He taught us how to repair things. So I was 11 years old when I first took my first engine apart. By 13, 14, I was able to rebuild an engine. And I found that after I came here, that skill set very quickly propelled me to be a certified Mercedes technician. And 20 years ago, actually, I earned more money than I make now as a commissioner. And for me to be part of this discussion about workforce development, it's more than just a notion, an intellectual discussion about this. It really works. So what we are doing, what we're trying to do, we've been doing the past couple of years, from the cabinet's perspective, we put a business plan in motion in terms of mapping out the next 3, 4, 5 years in ways we can connect with the regions, we can scale the apprenticeship, we find various sectors, companies, bring together the policymakers and those decision makers that have a say about this. And the result is phenomenal. We added about 2,000 apprentices in the last 2 years, about 200 programs across various sectors, from logistics, IT, healthcare, manufacturing, building, trades, you name it. If there's a skill, that's apprenticeable. And one of the counties, actually a judge executive, apprenticed from high school executive assistants. Some of these kids have an interest in going to law school, business school. What a great way to prepare someone for business by first exposing them to how to run a business office, right? How to be in that environment. But let's step back a little bit and let's talk about what really apprenticeship is all about. I'm sure you know the statistics in terms of the numbers. We have 50 to 55,000 students in Kentucky that graduate high school every year. Out of the 55,000, 60% go to college. Of those 60%, less than 20% graduate college. Roughly 60% of those who graduate wish they had chosen a different major. And we can go on to look at the statistics about underemployment, unemployment among college graduates. I know, from experience, going to law school is not cheap. Coming out of law school, you don't start with a 6-digit income. I promise you that. There's something that went wrong, maybe. But if you look back for the past few decades, we became in this country sort of trapped in the way we define success, that revolves around a diploma or a degree. How many of you have kids, high school kids, or kids? Right? How many of you, including me, my son just graduated, prefer that your kids went to college? That includes me. As we went to college visits, it was stunning to see how many kids have no clue what they want to do with life. But they want to go to college. So we became a knowledge acquisition society, defining success by a piece of paper but the knowledge application is oftentimes non-existent. Over the past few months, meeting with various university deans and presidents, it was stunning to hear that over 70% of bachelor's graduates do not have one-day on-the-job experience within the field of their choice. So what does that mean? If you hire someone, it's up to you as a company to ensure that the college graduate is equipped to do the job. The statistics say that across the nation, it takes companies up to a year and a half to recoup the investment. What does that mean? That means that if you hire a college graduate, for a year and a half, don't expect profit out of that hire. You can't function like that. So, what is apprenticeship? The apprenticeship in Kentucky has been on the books since the 1930s as a way to approach workforce development. The apprenticeship essentially is a way to grow your own when you match a young, inexperienced employee or individual with a master. It's that simple. Apprenticeship has been primarily known by building trades. And there's a misconception that apprenticeship is a union program. Our union's done a great job structuring and formalizing the training. But the apprenticeship can be really scaled across every sector. Another way to really understand and approach apprenticeship is an apprenticeship is a workforce development model that can be adopted by every company in every sector into their HR recruiting, training, and retention model. How many of you here represent individual companies, private sector? You have an HR, right? How do you hire? How do you assess the skills? How do you train? How do you equip someone? How do you retain a person? That's what apprenticeship is. So the apprenticeship has two components. It has the on-the-job training component, and it has the related technical instruction. And depending on the skill set, the OJT, the on-the-job training, and the RTI can range from 1 year, 12 months, to 6 years, right? For instance, somebody here, Judge Executive, mentioned that there's a dire need for welding specialists here, welders, carpenters in this region. Those skills range between 3 to 5 years, depending on the skills and the competency one wants to achieve. So essentially, the way the apprenticeship works in terms of the structure, we go to individual companies, the company becomes a sponsor, and then they decide to hire from various pipelines. Either high school, underemployed, overemployed, veterans, you name it. In Kentucky right now, we have about 3,400 active apprentices in 48 different skill sets. The average age of our apprenticeships in Kentucky is 24 to 26. Now what that tells me that a lot of the high school kids who went to college, didn't succeed, dropped out, they're looking for something else. Or kids who never tried anything, finally they are connecting with the apprenticeship. So the strategy or our vision or our hope in the next few years is to lower that age to 18. Let's hope that very few kids will waste 4, 5, 6 years before they figure out what to do with life. So that's one objective number one, priority number one. Capture as many of our kids as possible and scale it. And that's what I like to really sort of pitch to you here at GRADD. Ultimately, the apprenticeship, for purposes of clarification, this is not a government program. Please go back to your businesses and clarify, this is not a government program. This is, if you wish, sort of like a recipe from an old cookbook that's been rediscovered. Spice it the way you want it. It's nimble, it's very flexible to meet every company, every sector's needs. That's point number one. Point number two, the apprenticeship defines very well the parties' at the table. The apprenticeship puts the business sector in the driver's seat, brings the education sector in as a partner, has a commitment requirement by the apprentice, the student, and also bring the policymaker in. Those decision makers, either city, county, or state, or national level. And that brings me to really what the best way we can scale apprenticeships. As I mentioned, right now we go from company to company, and we have several apprenticeship programs in this region too, to scale it. We would love to find a way to be more efficient about that. Large companies with a lot of resources, big HR departments, are a lot more capable of really managing new employees, trainings, right? But an entity like GRADD, this nonprofit, or some sort of nonprofit would be a great way to really approach scaling apprenticeships, meaning create an economy of scale. In a nutshell, the purpose of GRADD, for instance, or some other nonprofit in the region, as an intermediary, playing the role of an intermediary would be very important. It would help businesses and applicants find the best match. How many of you ever worked with a temp agency in this region? Right. A temp agency is a good solution, but unfortunately I have nothing against temp agencies. But temp agencies really take a skilled employee from one place and bring it somewhere else, right? What we would like to offer for companies is to adopt the apprenticeship model and help grow their own employees. Now, there are a lot of questions, a lot of details we can address, but I would love to see a way to address your current business needs in this region by creating an intentional intermediary approach, listening to the business need, matching that with the educational need, and creating the pipeline for each business. That's sort of the high-level framework, the way we see apprenticeship can be scaled. And if we can expand on the many wonderful things that's already happening here, structure it. A lot of companies that have national or multinational presence, when they learn about the workforce development model, that's the same as in other counties and other states, in other countries. I think it's going to build a comfort zone for companies for expansion, for hiring. We have visits from other countries. A few months ago we had a delegation from Germany wanting to learn more about our apprenticeship program as they talk to their employers in Germany, looking at expanding in Kentucky, hiring, because that's the language they understand. Think about it from a different perspective. Many of you have had experience in terms of capital project development, right? How do we go about that? Purchase a land, hire an architect, plan, raise the money, and then implement, execute. We have to do the same kind of intentionality. We have to be so intentional about workforce development as well. Listen to the business, offer a solution, a framework for the business, and integrate available pipelines. So with these details, I'm really glad to report that across Western Kentucky we have a lot of great interest from companies from a lot of counties about this, in Eastern Kentucky, Northern Kentucky, across the state. I hope that Owensboro and this region we can really scale the apprenticeship in a way that meets the current need and also future need. One more comment I'd like to share with you. Those who have kids or raised kids, looking at my son's life and experience, I think it would be so important to find a way to teach our kids meaningful skill sets, right? It cannot happen without business engagement. One of the most important aspects of the apprenticeship is it invites businesses back to the workforce development process to take an active role. We cannot develop skills in an isolated, sterile classroom environment. It has to be in partnership with business. So I'd love to invite, again, extend this invitation to businesses in this region. Please consider be more active in terms of the workforce development. And the apprenticeship offers you that framework. If there are any questions that I could answer related to the apprenticeship, would love to. Yes, sir.
Yes, and I'm glad to hear, in effect, I think the state is beginning to change their idea of workforce development and particularly apprenticeship
Yes.
training. I know Helen Mountjoy and myself, we've probably been working on this. Helen's old girl has been doing this a lot longer than the old guy. But back in the 90s, as I shared with you, we started to experience a lack of skilled trades.
Right.
And I shared with you that one of our county commissioners, his son graduated high school, didn't want to go to college, took 2 years at OCTC, got an electrical associate's degree, went to work for a local electrician, gained some experiences, now making $80,000 at 22 years of age plus overtime. Instead of worrying about turning out kids with higher degrees, and I'm not opposed to that. If that's where you need to be, then there's a place to go. But if we started worrying about turning out happy, productive citizens who can take care of themselves, there'd be less responsibility on local governments and those things. Our hands are tied in a couple of ways. Organized labor has a wonderful apprenticeship program. Unfortunately, it's a closed system. They only train for those who are signatories to the contract. So the vast majority of those skilled trades are open shop trades. As a small businessman, as a small shop, I can provide all on-the-job training. And we hire people, we hire the history majors and the philosophy majors, and I'm not like some folks who say that's a waste of money. I think any education is worthy. But we hire those people and train them to take these good paying jobs. I can provide all on-the-job training all day long, but as a small company, I don't have the resources to provide the in-classroom training. That's where the community colleges come into it, I think, in partnership with business. The problem is that community colleges, either because of their system or government, only provide certain skill sets for classes. So, as an example, I shared with you, we have a very good HVAC program. Always full, businesses compete, we're hiring kids that come out there all the time. We have one in my business right now, goes to school 2 days a week, works for us 3 days a week. This is a long dialogue here. But anyway, my question is, and I hear you, small companies train, and our goal in an apprenticeship program is you have a master who trains to finally get. Our job is to get them to that journeyman level. When they become journeymen, then we see them leave small companies, and they go to the bigger companies that you're talking about who have the HR departments, and they have determined it's a heck of a lot cheaper to come and hire my guys away. They can pay more money, and we just continue to train. But we need to have some sort of a partnership with the state and with the local colleges to provide that side of it. Unfortunately, the money that we get here at GRADD, the money that Auburn area gets, is already, it's limited in scope and how we can use that money. I mean, and therein lies the problem. If instead of limiting that scope, the state would take that money from the feds and block grant it down to local governments where we could then use it in the best manner without being so restricted, we could do a lot of the things that you're talking about. You know, I'm telling you that you can make a good living, and you can take care of your family, and you can retire and live in dignity without the aid of government assistance in the skilled trades.
But let me try to respond. You had several questions there.
No, I just think it was a statement.
So the issue about small companies losing to big companies, you know, unless you have a a communist dictatorship government and control every
Always
aspect. They will
will.
always happen.
That's fine.
Okay. Question is, what happens if you don't do anything? So the big companies will always be able to afford training. So by a lot of small companies joining, the pool of better trained employees eventually will go where competition will provide access to the best, right? So how we scale this is important, because a small company doesn't have the resource like a large company. And that's where I think the intermediary at GRADD would play an important role. For an example, so you talked about grants and various types of state monies. I think what's very important is that you and the companies and we have representative democracy. Let's talk. Let's articulate our need. Owensboro's need may be different than Hazard. And let's make sure that we articulate the need to where neither from Frankfurt or from DC we see a push down, hey, you do it or lose it kind of thing. So in terms of funding, with the Kentucky KCTCS, the community college system, we have a partnership, and they actually adopted the apprenticeship as a model. So if you have an employee who is a student at KCTCS, they finish the apprenticeship, that's the first level of accreditation. Also, you do not have to enroll in a degree program to be able to use the technical college as a training provider. So if you need to have blueprint reading or a specific curriculum, they will provide it. And I think with confidence, if we have a number of companies in this region that need HVAC, let's go, and I would be more than happy to be part of this discussion and deliver that, because that's what the purpose of the community college is, right? Because that's what's needed. In terms of funding, if we have a nonprofit or an intermediate, let's call it intermediate, that creates a pipeline, I think that's where we can create an economy of scale. As of 2018-19 school year, for example, high school kids that earn fees monies and they do not want to go to college can use that money to offset educational costs or apprenticeship.
It's not well known in the public. I can
Well-
tell you. Is it, Helen? Is that, I mean, I'm not even aware of that.
So if you have, let's see, if we have in Owensboro, how many high school kids graduate in Owensboro? 2,000 in this region, Davis County, 1,500?
Maybe 1,500.
1,500.
maybe.
So out of 1,500, if we stay with the statewide statistic, 500-600 don't go to college. If those 500-600 kids earned an average $1,000 of fees money, that's a good chunk of money. But each company will not have, individual companies will not spend, I don't know how many hours chasing $500, $1,000, because it's not efficient. But if you have an intermediary that has 500 kids in the pool, all of a sudden $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 just from fees money is a big chunk of money to go to KCTCS and articulate an agreement. We need to have XYZ delivered. And that's how we can go with the other workforce monies as well. So be very intentional in the way you pool the money to create an economy of scale. That's where actually we are working with a couple of experts from around the country in scaling intermediaries. We have 5 or 6 intermediaries in Kentucky that are marching forward towards becoming a sponsor. And if there's an interest, maybe GRADD would have an interest in learning more about how you could play this role as an intermediary, scaling the skilled workforce pool for small and large companies. I would be glad to make those connections and put a business plan together and test it. Maybe we can start out with smaller numbers, choose 1 or 2 sectors, and market it, and then see what happens. One of the problems is, tell me when I need to shut up. I don't know how much time I have.
Right now, so I can answer the question. First, I GRADD already offers 2 or 3 programs,
Right.
but there are many other skilled programs that we have no access to, when I say GRADD, through OCTC,
Right.
through our community college. And if I hear you right, if local employers go out there and say, we need a class in blueprint reading,
Right.
they have a responsibility, or will they provide that?
Yes, yes.
Well, that's good, because I've been on them to put a plumbing program in for years, and rebuffed it at every opportunity. Secondly, if you stay around, you'll hear a report on our budget. GRADD doesn't have a lot of things. We're cutting our budget again this year because we don't have enough money to act as an intermediary.
Let me respond to that.
And let me just, one more thing before you respond. And small businesses are happy to put skin in the game. We make available to our employees funds to go to OCTC if they want to participate in an HVAC program. So small businesses are not asking to just suck off of government.
Let me ask you a question. How many, what's the percentage that in this region, temp agencies charge a company to provide an employee? You know that?
$15 maybe,
What
No,
percentage?
but how much charge you to send you a temp person?
$15 an hour.
$2,000 an hour. So how, that would be about 40%, 50% overage?
I don't know.
Premium.
I mean, if you come to my business right
Yeah.
now, you don't know anything. You're 18 years old out of college. You make between $12 and $14 an hour to come to work for me and start learning. I would say a temp agency is probably taking, because they're providing workers' comp, they're providing insurance, and they're providing a lot of things. So it's probably 40% of it.
40%.
They're probably paying 10 to the
So
worker.
the point I'm trying to make, so if you pay 40% premium, not to get a skilled employee, but a warm body. The intermediary models.
Sometimes the body don't want.
I'm not going there. So the intermediate models that really are committed to deliver apprenticeships, trained employees, work between 7 to 15% through the economy of scale, because the purpose is not to do this for profit. bit before you go into business. So there are creative ways we can go about this. For instance, how many companies for the Davis County or the city of Owensboro, how many IT projects do you have? Cloud security, cyber security, computer maintenance, you name it. Just look at this area. Who's doing that? A lot of that is really contracted out somewhere else. So why don't we think about keeping those jobs, some of the entry-level jobs, available for our high school kids, so at least they have some on-the-job experience, even if they will go to a different route, you know. So there are different ways I think we can, I know you guys are doing, a lot of regions doing a lot of great work, so we're not reinventing the wheel. Apprenticeship is more about intentional resequencing to meet the need more efficiently.
And I think one other comment, and I know they gotta move on, but, and, you know, I've got people in our county that best welders I ever seen. But the industry, every industry has their own testing system. And they can do any kind of mechanic work, they can weld, but they cannot pass the test. So here they're working out of their house, not making a lot of money when they should be working out of their house. And, but these plants want 2 years of experience, industrial experience. You can't get that unless you get a job.
Right.
So how do you overcome those two things?
Well,
It's testing, that there should be a standardized test for all industry when it comes to steel workforce, and then you still gotta do something to, about these tests, where's a standard test, because one guy can pass a test in one plant, but they move to another job and he can't pass, he can't pass the next test.
One of the important aspects of the workforce development discussion will have to engage a change of culture, the way businesses approach this. That's what I mentioned, being active participant in this. For instance, IBM, in the recent 6-7 years, started a school, it's called the PTech, Pathway to Technology. And now they are somewhere around 30% of their new hires, based on the statistics, are non-degree. It used to be you couldn't even submit an application if you didn't have a master's or a PhD for some of these IT companies. But what they're finding out is that you can have the degree but not the skills. So companies are actually much rather, if you have an interest in IT, hire you right out of high school, find out your strength, dispositions, and then lead you through college, because your college experience meets the company's needs. So my experience with companies that you mentioned is that when we sit down to explain and articulate the benefit of apprenticeship, adopting this model, companies are more likely to rehire and train their own. So if you have companies' names, let me know. I would be more than glad to talk to them.
But when you have below 4% unemployment rate, you haven't got to one, but everybody wants to work while they got a job.
Right.
And then you're gonna have trouble getting employees.
Right.
That are skilled. I mean, we have trouble in Hancock County with skilled workers. You can probably ask Karen back there from Century. They're looking to hire 250 people, but it's gonna be tough.
Right.
Let me just real quickly, and then we'll go on. In defense of the younger generation, I'll never forget when I was growing up, my mom and dad generation said they didn't know what this world was coming to do because we were not going to make a damn difference in the world. I think every generation says that about the upcoming generation. Part of the issue exactly now, when you go to hire people, all the ones who can pass the drug test, can do the thing, show up on time, they're already employed.
Yeah.
They are employed. We got that, we talk about workforce participation rate as a better indicator as opposed to, or the number of jobs that are out there as opposed to the unemployment. But you have a lot of them that just not looking. But we have some really good young Gen Xers and millennials out there. I'm not so sure that they want to crawl under a house and fix a pipe.
Some do.
Some will and some do, but, it's a different world, maybe, and you are exactly right, it's convincing the parents that that's on.
And just one more comment. If we can engage more kids in work, we will see a drop in the drug reliance. getting lost.
Oh, amen. Amen.
And, you know, my son worked through his senior year, and it was fun to watch his first paycheck experience. He had the hours and the hourly rate calculated, but he didn't account for taxes. Okay? That lesson was better learned than if I talked to him for 2 years about it. So he's very cognizant about it. So, and then those lessons cannot be learned in the classroom setting. Again, anyone, I'm going to have some business cards around. If you have a question, go ahead.
I just want to reiterate too that these, you know, the judges and the mayors, they're their own business too. So they've got firemen, they've got mechanics, maintenance, and everybody. So what a great opportunity to actually show using your own city and county administrations and employees to promote the program.
We do summer internships, and I think most cities and counties.
You're ready to register apprenticeships for your office?
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.